Hi, could you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
My name is Herb Delute. I'm currently the Fonds president of the Delano chapter. I currently live in San Diego. I'm a retired school administrator, but my father was a Delano manongs, so I was born and raised in Delano. Interesting stories like I worked in the fields, so everything about growing grapes I kind of know from my father. And in fact, I worked when I was in high school, college, and even when I was teaching, I would come here during the summer to work. And I think the key thing is that I wanted to be with my dad, and that's one of the few ways we got to connect and work in the fields with him.
Can you tell us a little bit about some memories that stick out to you about growing up in Delano?
Delano is interesting because Delano is a great place to be born and raised. And I think one of the things I remember is we lived on the west side of town. And it's interesting because, like, a lot of my sister's family friends were mestizos, who were part Filipino and Mexican, African American, Italian. So, but that's what I grew up with the mestizo family. And then, because my sister and I are only like less than a year apart, it's really interesting because then I started hanging out with my friends, and they were all like myself, born and raised in Delano. And it was interesting because in Delano, you went to the same school from kindergarten all the way to eighth grade until we went to high school. So it was really joy growing up in Delano. But the more important item is, like, if you want hard work, you're born and raised and working in Delano. That's the things I remember, for all the hard work.
Can you tell us a little bit about what today's event means to you and the community?
I think the more important item is, like, one thing I emphasize is our story. Because our individual stories as a family, as being Filipino, being Filipino American, it's really about American history. And for a long time, we were not incorporated, and it's really important to have our stories heard and shared. And I think the key thing with this particular item is the Larry Itliong Unity Park grand opening. Is that Larry Itliong was a mover and shaker of the farm labor movement, and he was the reason why the grape strike happened in Delano. So we want to honor him. But also another part is the fact the unity aspect of, like, the strike could not happen with just the Philippines. You had to work with the Filipino Mexican Americans. And all of a sudden, when they went to the grape strike in terms of the boycott, they had to work all across the country too. So that signified the unity. And I think one of the things that also happened is that was important is, like, growing up, we always saw ourselves as a part of the community. But the question is, because of what does it mean to be united? And I think the key is, like, if there is a cause, there's an issue that we can go with together, that's how we become united. And that's the thing that's important for me with the Larry Itliong Unity Park, is the concept of unity.
Can you talk to us a little bit about Fonz and what you enjoy about working with Fonz?
FONS is the Filipino American National Historical Society. One of the phrases that we have is no history, no self. No history, no self. And that's what we want to emphasize, the fact, like, each of us has our stories to tell, so we want to emphasize that. But more important, it's really about the Filipino American identity and experience. And that's where FONS comes in. I think what we looked at is, like, we tried to make sure we articulate and have a common language and structure to state, like, how the Philippines wound up in Delano. It's like there's the four waves that we talked about, so we talk about that. Is the first group where, like, we talked about the Manila Spanish galleon trade, where the Philippines' presence was actually here, in California. And also, they also settled in Louisiana, where they had the shrimping industry. Then we talk about the second wave, where, like, after the Spanish-American War, we talk about now the Philippines are no longer citizens or nationals, but rather they were brought here to work in the fields. They were in Alaska, they were in Hawaii, in California. Then the World War II happened. Then, as a result of that, a lot of the veterans were able to come here with their wives because of the Fiancé Act and the War Brides Act. And that became the start of the Filipino community that we know of now. And now we have a part of our history is really important. And that's what we want to share, is, like, not just with the Filipino community, but with all the community in general, whether it's a Mexican, Latino, Asian community. So that's where we feel very strongly. And I want to give credit to Dr. Fred Cordova, who was the founder, and also our Auntie Dorothy, who also was the founder of the Filipino National Historical Society, which is housed now in Seattle, Washington.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you hope future generations will remember about today?
I think I think it's important is that it's important for them to know that your family has a history of coming to the United States, Delano, whether it's your Amano family. But the thing is that we want to like ask the questions, and that's why I'm really big on which is funds and what I think is all is oral history. My wife is a professor at Miramar College, and one of the projects she has the students interview a family member of Filipino American history. Not sometimes because they just don't know, and then what's important is that then they tie it to the concept of what they learned of the four waves, so that it's not just like it's just my family, but it actually sits in a historical perspective. And I think that's critical because just saying like, yeah, my dad was a Delano Mono, but rather I say he came here and the reason why, because they needed workers. He also was part of the grape strike. He went out on strike, but then it was hard for a lot of families to stay on strike. And in fact, like a lot of the manongs died alone. So we want to share those kind of stories also. But also, that's my story. What I want is you find out what is your story, find out, research it, find out, and also with the advent of social media, video, please take it because it's something powerful being able to listen to your Lola, your grandmother, and just hear their voice and see them. I think that's really critical. That's why I'm a proponent of oral history, of preserving the language, and whatever is important in our history.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
I think the key thing is that Delano is a history in itself, and I think one thing I want to emphasize, like the Filipino community has a beautiful history. Like we have the mestizo families, and then also we created a Filipino community hall, which was raised by the Filipino community, where they used the rooster flights, they used the queen shows, and because of that, and then it was used as also a place where the strike was. And I want to emphasize, like the Filipino community in Delano, we have professionals here, we have young families, but the more important, like they have not embraced or learned about the Filipino American history. That's what we want to share, to make sure they understand that that is also their history. And that's the key thing I want to have. Thank you. All right. You're welcome.